Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's panel discussion. This session is being recorded. We've seen that as technology continues to advance in the restaurant industry, cybersecurity is becoming crucial. Restaurants use technology to streamline their operations, to enhance customer experiences, but these advancements can also introduce new risks and vulnerabilities. By prioritizing cybersecurity and integrating security measures, restaurants can protect data, they can maintain trust, and they can safeguard operations in this new digital landscape. So today, our panelists are going to talk about evolving the customer and employee experience. And this could include things like AI or voice-assisted ordering, kiosks, employee technology and applications, even things like predictive analytics, either for the customer or for their supply chain, but also the associated cyber risks that can come with that. If you have questions today for our panel, please use the Q&A box. It's down at the bottom of the screen. Now, by way of introduction, my name is Chris Hintz. I am a Senior Director of Product Marketing here at Fortinet. With me today is Carl Goodhue, CTO of BurgerFi. Carl, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me here, Chris. Carl Goodhue. I'm the CTO of BurgerFi. We have 200 burger restaurants combined with pizza restaurants. Anthony's Cold Five Pizza and Wings, mostly up and down the East Coast. Come from a retail background and joined BurgerFi about 2.5 years ago. Thanks for having me.
Great. Thank you for being here, Carl. I also have Paul Kay, Senior Vice President and Global CISO for EchoStar. Paul, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Chris. My name is Paul. I'm the Global CISO for EchoStar and Hughes. We're a quite large telecommunications company, terrestrial and satellite based, and we have customers all over the world, including restaurants like Carl's, and we do many other types of data transport work. But one of our new focuses moving into 2023 is managed security services for medium and large enterprises.
Awesome. Again, thank you for being here, Paul. Gentlemen, appreciate your time. Let's dive right into this. So, I guess I'll look over to you first a little bit, Carl, here. So what are some of the new technological innovations that are currently being used in the restaurant industry, both to improve customer, but also employee satisfaction?
Yeah, we've been working on this for quite some time. So obviously we have a couple of years under our belt of new innovations. We've been rolling out kiosks to most of our BurgerFi stores. It works in a fast casual environment where we have kiosks that greet the customer. There is always the option of talking to a person and placing an order at the POS. But we find that a lot of customers want to act quickly to order their food, don't necessarily wish to talk to someone, especially if they've been there before, they know what their order is, and they just want to place their order, sit down and talk with the family. So we rolled out kiosks. That's been fantastic for us. It always ensures that the server is asking the person, hey, do you want fries? Do you want a drink? A server at a POS might forget to mention a special, whereas on the kiosk, it's always right there. So we found those very helpful for us and for employee training in that it cuts down the amount of training time it takes to get someone on the front of house. In addition, we rolled out voice AI at all of our pizza restaurants. So actually Becky's the person who answers the phone at all of our pizza restaurants. She's the best performing employee we have in the entire company in terms of order taking. And you can talk to her natural language. I want a half pepperoni, half sausage pizza, large. Oh, let's make it a small, right? And it just works. And then, of course, there's a lot of boring stuff we do that boring in terms of it's not flashy, where we're improving our supply chain, we're improving our training, we're improving our back office operations, which doesn't necessarily make the news. It's not something that is sexy, but it's required, and it improves our bottom line, essentially, because we have better trained workforce and we have a better understanding of what's in the restaurant and how to better improve those COGS.
Right. It sounds like there's a lot of technology that comes to bear more than people probably realize when they just visit one of your establishments and place their order.
Right.
As part of that, I'm curious, how are the actual restaurant operators embracing these new technologies as they get rolled out?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that they do embrace it under duress. That is, hey, there's an operational requirement that you take inventory every week. Uh, we want them to focus on selling and making food. Technology should not be an obstruction. It should be help them get through their day, make their job easier. So when it does that, we see really high adoption rates, and kiosk is a great example of that. But there are cases, of course, where they just have to do the job, and inventory is part of that job. And I'm sure we'll get better at it. How to get employees excited and motivated about it. But I would say that, they do what they need to do. And more importantly, we provide them tools in a format that they're used to. So, most of our staff are younger. It's just the nature of QSR and casual dining and fast casual. So that generation, just like my generation and pretty much all generations now, they're in front of their phone all the time. It's an extension of the human being at this point. So we like to deploy technologies that reflect that. So all of our training is done on the phone format. There's no sit down and watch a TV with VCR or anything like that. Now you get to go through it. You get points for doing the video, doing the tests. And our employees do respond well to that, the gamification aspects. And we just try to avoid those spreadsheets and workbooks as much as possible.
Great. Yeah, I can understand how leveraging what people are used to could make it a lot easier for people to just pick up that tech. And even if they don't love it, they at least don't feel like it's an annoyance to use.
Right.
Talking to you a little bit, Paul. So with all this technology that Carl just mentioned, how are managed security solution providers or MSSPs, I think we abbreviate that a lot, responding and supporting a lot of this new tech that's showing up?
Well, I think the first thing we have to realize is with every new application, every new breakthrough in technology, what we call the attack surface exponentially increases. There's just something else to leverage, whether it's an unknown vulnerability or a human error issue, to get into that place and unfortunately wreak havoc, chaos, and other bad things. And really, what MSSPs do is help Carl be laser focused on enabling the business and facilitating the transactions of the customers and making sure there's a good availability. What we're protecting the back end from, if you want to call them the bad guys, and the randos who always want to get in. Also helps in regulatory requirements like data protection, and it's always great to have a plan. So having MSSP on board, you also have an incident response plan and team on board. Unfortunately, when things happen, not if.
Yeah, I can imagine, unfortunately in today's world, it's just a matter of time, and having someone, like you just talked about there to back you up is very valuable.
Yeah. I mean, the real key is, many years ago, it was all about preventing a breach. These days, it's not about preventing a breach. It's about reacting and responding to it to minimize the damage the breach may occur, to make sure it doesn't become a material issue for the business and the corporation.
Thanks, Paul. Now, we've talked a bit about how this technology benefits the operator and obviously the customer walking in and the experience they have. But Carl, I was going to ask you, what role does some of the employee technology play in actually just improving that rank and file employee satisfaction and retention? Because I know there can be a lot of churn in that, and that's costly to the restaurant.
Yeah. Everyone in the restaurant industry has massive churn. I think that industry average, if you're getting better than 100% turnover in a year, you're knocking it out the park, which is, from a technologist, that's crazy to me, but that's okay. And I think that we see technology help our employees with customer retention in a couple different ways. The first is, let's take kiosk, and it's a very controversial topic. You'll see it on Facebook and Wall Street Journal. It's everywhere. The question of tipping on a kiosk, where arguably, no one assisted you with the placement of that order. However, what's not talked about is who actually receives those tips. So the employees across the entire restaurant in our organization split the tips evenly, except for, of course, salary manager and things like that. So if they're hourly employees, they are distributed the tips that the kiosk receives from the customer. Of course, the kiosk receives no tips. So it's actually increasing the average pay of everybody in that building. And of course, the customer is receiving service from the employee after the order occurs. Our employees deliver the food. They make sure they do table touches. They make sure that, can I get your refill? Is there anything else you want? So that service does occur. It's just after the interaction itself. So of course, more pay in your paycheck generally equals better retention. And I would say the other thing we talked about a little bit earlier is training. If I know how to do my job effectively, then I'm going to feel better about being there. If I don't know how to do something, that causes angst, anxiety. I don't necessarily have anyone to ask. So I'm going to feel like I maybe don't belong, or I haven't been trained well enough, and maybe I should be doing something else. So putting that training in the palm of your hand, literally, and having a reference guide on how to execute anything in the restaurant, whether it's how to, reconcile cash at the end of the day, whether it's how to make a specific build of a burger, whether it's, eco-sure or eco-safe handling and health and safety, it's all right there for you. And all of the checklists are right there. So your temp monitoring throughout the day, you don't have to go grab a piece of paper and make notes. It's all right there for you. So I think that in general makes the job not easier, but in effect, more efficient, and should assist with employee retention. Because if you have a job where everything's pen and paper and there's a binder of how to do everything versus having it all on your fingertips and referenceable and, quickly look something up, I think that changes the way you go about your job.
Thank you. Yeah, that I can understand some of that. And actually, while we're kind of talking about some of this, one thing that I'm kind of curious of, how do you ensure, and even how does the employee feel comfortable that the cybersecurity of customer data, the people they're interacting with, and that sensitive information is actually as protected as it can be? I mean, as Paul, you and I just kind of chatted about, we know that there is no absolute in this world anymore, but how can we at least feel confident that we've taken all the steps that can be taken to ensure this?
Sure. Well, to Carl's other comment, I think if we start tipping our AI systems, we're in real trouble, but that's for the future. Yeah, just in reference to this, for better or worse, when you have good security, you don't see it. Everything just works. It's available. There is always a little bit of friction because there has to be, but there's availability. Customers are happy. The employees are getting their tips, and I think really the testament is that consistent workflow. Just imagine if Carl's business was hit with a successful ransomware attack and the kiosks went down. The business is done until that's fixed. The employees aren't getting any compensation because you don't know what they made, and the customers can't make any orders. And going to paper and pencil, you try to do that in a very technically advanced business is near to impossible. So I think one of the things that we can rely on is track record, that things just work and things are protected. And the best thing to do is to create some employee awareness of all the things that we do on the back end to protect these systems. So they do understand that there's a lot of work and a lot of threats out there, and they can help out. If they do see something, they can say something.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
No, I was asking if you had any thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. So to Paul's point, we train our employees monthly with a video program, which is, again, it's telling them in basic layman's terms. If someone comes into your store and wants to plug in a USB drive, turn them away, call your manager, call me, call HR, call whoever, just let them know that someone came in. And it's all, the videos aren't just boring, old school, don't do this, don't do that. It's more, it's animated, and we try to get it to a tone that is fun in some ways about cybersecurity and what you have to think about and make sure that you're doing. And I would say also that we do have policies and procedures. We're publicly traded, so we do push that out to the employees about cash handling or customer data, credit cards. Our systems don't store any credit card information. It's all passed through. And additionally, we designed the systems to be redundant. So if something were to happen, I take the view that I still cross my fingers and put all this protection in place, and hopefully it's not a win, but if, we have redundant systems, so we don't lose those sales. We can quickly restore. We have backups from the prior day, sometimes within 15 minutes, and it's just a case of restoring a single site. Of course, if something massive were to happen, we have plans in place on how to deal with that, and our stores can operate on islands if they need to. So it takes a lot of, again, I say it's not sexy, right? The planning side isn't sexy, but people want to hear, ransomware and the FBI is involved. I think all those meetings that occur so that you're never in the news, that's important. And that's something where we rely on our vendors to assist us. Of course, we have our own plans in place. They have their plans in place, but we're a small team. And to Paul's point, we want to focus on the business. We want to sell more burgers, more pizzas. We don't want to be spending 24 hours a day monitoring our systems. And, that's why we rely on the vendors that we do, because they do that for us.
Yeah, I think that was going to be my next question to you is, with all this technology, how can the restaurant owners and managers ensure that all that tech is actually being used effectively and ensure that their businesses do at peak efficiency?
Well, first of all, we try to make sure they don't have to think about it. So the systems that we've installed, it starts with the payment device. They're end-to-end encrypted EMV devices so that it's just payment tokens passing through. And of course, that sits on a network that is secured. It's a Fortinet network. So there's firewalls, there's switches in place, but nothing travels, clear text at all. Everything's secured on that payment device, tokenized, sent up, and the POS never sees that credit card data. And then in terms of PII, it's really customer phone number. Yes, it's PII, but it's something we take seriously. And again, that travels on that same secured network that's segmented so that if someone is in the restaurant with a laptop, there's a software firewall, so to speak, or software wall between what the guest is getting from the internet and how that data traverses from the POS to our loyalty systems. So those two walls can't be crossed, and they get a great experience browsing the internet in the restaurant, and we have a very secure experience behind the counter, ensuring that that data belongs where it belongs. And I would say that we don't really want our GMs or managers to even think about that. We just want them to focus on what they do, which is sell food and make food.
Any thoughts, Paul?
Yeah, security really has to be a foundational control these days. When you're building a network, you have to build in security into the network so it all integrates. So there's definitely less friction. The days of trying to bolt it on while in production and doing it more in a waterfall fashion are just over, and is rife with risk at this point, because sometimes the technologies are they're not compatible because they weren't built to support a endpoint detection response system that needs 8 gigabytes of RAM, and you built your servers at 4 because that's all you needed. So you really need to start at the beginning and bring us in when you're developing and designing, and then to use that overused term, but it's basically shifting left. The other thing is, and unfortunately, when things happen, like Carl said, resilience is key, segregation is key, but just one call out on that, you can have a backup, and let's say there's a ransomware event on your production systems. Really make sure that there's good segregation and that your backups are clean, and that you have an independent recovery environment that you can test your backups to make sure that they're patent, they're clean, they're not full of malware, or it's legacy data and it's just not going to work for you anyway. So it's a waste of time. So there's a lot of componentry behind resilience. It's not just putting it into a data center or on a hard drive and then plug it into a computer. It's much more complicated than that. And that's something we can help with.
Yeah, and you mentioned helping out, and I think, Carl, I'd like to understand, for all this technology, how are you making sure that gets implemented and rolled out?
Yeah, it's me and my 5-person team. So obviously, it's huge. I don't know how we, so many people. No, we rely 100% on vendors to get things done. The team is focused on the value add of the business. And so we work with folks like Hughes to design how we want to implement networks and visual displays in our stores. And then we work with other vendors on kiosks and POS. And then we come up with a blueprint, and we ask Hughes, okay, we're opening up a new site on this date. We need this just like we planned. And they go and execute that. So at the end of the day, we have a reliable partner that we know we can say, okay, we got these sites coming up. We need to upgrade these other sites. And here's a list. And of course, we work weekly with the project management team, but it's a turnkey solution that we have a plan. We go execute the plan. The network strategy is already designed. Everything, all the little pieces, all the details have been worked out, and Hughes and other vendors go and execute that for us. It's the only way we would be able to manage it. We just don't have the manpower, person power to get it done in terms of FTEs.
Sounds like you're a very key partner, Paul. You?
Well, we love their burgers and pizza, so I try to, whenever I travel, I try to hit one of those restaurants. It's a great place to eat. But yeah, we've been good partners for quite some time, and we're on the back end assisting and enabling the business as much as possible, and creating an exponential effect to Carl's amazing team, so he can deliver the services, so the company can deliver their services. Another thing that we do is we make sure that wherever in the world you are, we're complying with regulatory controls. A lot of them are privacy controls like GDPR in Europe, or controls in the US or down in South America, but they heavily rely on cybersecurity controls to comply with the privacy controls. So what we do is every day is to make sure we work with our customers to make sure that what is private remains private, and so forth.
Perfect. One thing I wanted to make sure I tossed out there, Carl, is that more than likely you're probably associated with some CISO and restaurant associations in general, or you follow some of that. I was wondering if you can tell me, what are you hearing from some of your peers? Are you hearing some of the same challenges? Anything kind of as an industry trend that you have eyeballs on?
Yeah, I think that The common theme, I came from retail, and retail operates at a different pace than restaurant. And I think at the end of the day, it really has to do with the margins in the two business. So a constant theme I hear is, how can we do this on the cheap, right? Just bluntly. And that means simplification. It means don't overcomplicate it. You have, it is very complicated, but at the end of the day, it's a probably 2,500 to 5,000 square foot space, relatively simple in terms of the goal. And if you go with a single partner, you can really reduce those costs versus trying to do best in breed and build it yourself. So costs are always a common theme. And then the second thing is, how can I train a transient workforce? And by that, I mean, it's constantly churning effectively on the same 6 to 12 bullet points, knowing that they won't be there in a year. And that's tough. That's really tough. And I don't think anyone's really cracked that. We try our best, but you're on a cycle. And if someone walks in day one, and maybe the training is, their onboarding training, but, what am I going to hit them with? Because they're not going to remember everything. And all it takes is someone to plug in their phone to charge it, and they plug it into the POS, and we all know where that goes. So, we harden our systems, but human ingenuity and compromising your systems is really, really tough. So I think that's a constant battle too.
I'm going to ask both of you to get out your crystal balls here, for a second, and maybe I'll stick with you for a second, Carl.
Okay.
How do you see the restaurant industry evolving over the next couple of years, both technologically and how that will impact customers and employees?
I first of all, I don't have a crystal ball, but it's a toss up. So I see the delivery companies going, it's kind of fading away to a certain extent. Will that continue? Will there be a medium here where some percentage of customers still want delivery? I think that's up for debate. And then the question will be, how do you get that quicker, right? So I don't know the time frame, but is drone delivery a reality? Is robot delivery at scale a reality? Potentially, but I think that it all comes down to one thing: the customer being able to get their food however they want, whenever they want, and pay for it however they want. So I think you're going to see a lot more with customer satisfaction coming from the customer experience side of being able to order from multiple restaurants and have that delivered at one time. We're starting to see that over the last 6 to 12 months with the DSPs, the delivery service providers, allowing you to add on to certain restaurants. But I think it's going to become more a la carte. And okay, you want a burger, fries, and a drink. I want €1, and the kids want pizza, and you just kind of order it, and it just magically comes together and delivered all at one time. I think that's the ultimate goal. I just don't know who is going to be able to execute that and get that done without going bankrupt.
Yeah. And Paul, from your perspective, where do you see this all evolving to?
Every industry is just relying more and more on technology. I don't care if you're in the meatpacking business or you're making chips, you're relying on technology every day, more and more and more, which, as I alluded to before, that increases your attack surface. And you also have to think about your third-party risk, like the delivery food apps Carl was mentioning, and all the other third parties that you need to conduct your business with. So you're going to have to pay attention to your contracts with them to really make sure that there is good cybersecurity compliance language in there that they don't redline and negotiate out. So there's some consequences for downtime. It's the world is just hyper connected these days, and I think what would be a naive thought would be, let's just protect our network and we're fine. You're connected to a million other networks, a million applications. You're in the cloud. So you have to be really, really thoughtful when you're building your business network and all these third-party applications and integrations that come in, and bring security in the beginning to do those risk assessments and put those controls in place, so you don't have disaster on the back end.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to pop open the Q&A window now. We're going to see some of the questions that people have had for us, and obviously for those that are on the call right now, if you have a question that you've been thinking of, now's the time to type it in there. Looking through these, there's actually one common thread I've seen from a couple of these. Be interested to get both of your thoughts on this. They're asking about doing some of that training and some of the experience that I think, Carl, you kind of mentioned being, it's phone-like or using a phone. They're asking whether or not this is an employee's own phone and just BYOD in general, and what sort of security risk you kind of see that as being when you're in a BYOD world, or where that employee is leveraging or maybe a personal device for business purposes.
Yeah, it is BYOD for frontline training. There are provided devices when it's, an inventory or something like that. But for training, it's BYOD. They join the guest network. Of course, there are concerns in that, what are they bringing into the restaurant? But at the end of the day, they would have brought it in anyway and connected to the Wi-Fi. And so it's a measured response to what is ultimately going to happen. And you see that everywhere. BYOD is essentially something you can't stop. It's just going to happen. People will find a way to do their job. People want to do their job. And I think the other area here is that we don't operate in California, so we don't necessarily have some of those exposures from a legal perspective. And if someone chose not to do that, then we would, of course, if someone said, hey, I don't want to use my own device, we do have mechanisms in place to train that employee manually, I guess is the word. We'll show them how to do it. And, we'll work around it. It's not a explicit requirement to work for BurgerFi to use your own phone.
All thoughts on BYOD?
You need to protect that device from connecting to what I call the mothership network. Think about creating a BYOD network for your employees if that's your policy, that they have to bring their own device. So that they're not on the guest network, the open Wi-Fi for customers or anything like that, and just segregate it. And you really need to control the access to critical things like, certain apps like HR apps and other stuff. And it's a company decision based on risk if you want to have them access email or other things. In reference to applications to enable the business, my recommendation would be to bring in some containerized software so that everything to run the business is in a container controlled by the business. And if the employee separates from the company, you can hopefully just click a button and it'll terminate that connection and all the data in it, and not have anything living on the local machine, so they're not walking away with a lot of vital data. So, those are some recommendations.
Thank you. We're getting a little bit close to time, so I think we've got one more good question here. I'll just kind of toss it out, and maybe I'll start over with you this time, Paul. It says, when thinking about cybersecurity, is ransomware the number one concern, or is there another risk that is higher priority? What are your thoughts?
Oh, there's so many risks. Just in reference to ransomware, it's like the Elvis of malware. Everybody knows about it, and really, there's a reason why. It's the highest consequence. If you are successfully hit, you're locked out. You're not going to be able to run your business. Unlike, let's say, a malware comes in to do surveillance to, unfortunately, steal credit card numbers or something like that. Well, that's really bad. There's a lot of regulatory issues and probably litigation in the future. Your business is still running. So any type of security incident where it stops your business, it shuts down your IoT systems, it shuts down your network, those are the highest consequence. And, ransomware it is one type of that. There are other things like brute force attacks, like DDoSes that shut down your network. So I categorize anything that can shut down your business or significantly slow it down as the highest consequence. And everything else, while it's really bad, is relatively secondary, if that makes sense.
It does. Thanks for that. Any thoughts, Carl?
Yeah, the insurance policy has a whole questionnaire just on ransomware that's as long as the rest of the cyber policy questionnaire. So, I think the insurance companies are paying out a ton on that. So yes, it's definitely top of mind. I would say that in the restaurant space, the other area of concern, major area of concern, doesn't really fall under cybersecurity, but it's destruction of property. Someone, hey, I broke the POS, or I dropped it. Right? It's a rough environment to begin with, but it does fall under that purview of keeping the business running. And we had a case where someone kept unplugging the security cameras. Well, guess what? It records you as you unplug the cord. So it's going up to the cloud. So yeah, I think that, it's a tough conversation, and I think that our teams do amazing jobs, but at the same time, it's also generally a job where it's not corporate, it's not white collar, blue collar job. So it's just in a different role, and we sometimes end up with some bad eggs who are hurting company property. So it's a concern. It's something that we battle with, but we have systems in place and policies in place, and we address it when it happens. That would be my secondary beyond ransomware.
All right. Well, Carl, Paul, thank you very much for your time today. Appreciate you being here. And to our audience as well, thank you for giving us your time today and listening to us. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks.